Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of the Chapter 3 Stigma. Again, this is a podcast and a series for those that feel like they're dealing and struggling with addiction or substance abuse, and it's resulting in feelings of loneliness, separation, anxiety, or depression, and just feeling like you don't know where to go, you don't know how to start your healing journey. And this podcast is here to let you know and to prove to you that you are not alone in the way that you think, in the way that you feel, and the way that you behave. So for this episode 2 of the series, we're going to be covering and talking about the promises of recovery. Now, I know personally from my experience that talking about what could be or how things could be better someday was oftentimes frustrating because it felt like just words that people were saying. Yes, you feel like you're at your lowest point that you could ever get to, but addiction can always bring you lower, and it will shock you at how quickly it will bring you there. So I feel like it is important to talk about what could be from the aspect of someone who was an addict and is an addict. And I had feelings that things would never improve, that light would never shine again in my life. This is despite having, from the outside looking in, what was a perfect life. I had a beautiful home, a beautiful wife, a beautiful family. And yet it felt like no light would ever shine on my life again. So I want to talk about the promises and just show you how radically things can change in a very short time if and when you choose to enter recovery. So for this podcast, again, the premise of this podcast is we'll read sections of what I believe are the most important parts of recovery literature and thought. And then I'll kind of give the overlay of my story just to show you that you are not alone, again, with your thoughts, actions, and behavior and feelings. So for this week's episode, we are going to a section or a part of the Alcoholics Anonymous book called The Promises. So to the book. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. So, this is one of my favorite 1 to 2 paragraphs that I've read in recoveries, especially in the state or in the part of my recovery journey that I am in right now. Because, again, relatively speaking, when you look at my commitment to a lifetime of recovery, I'm still relatively early in that journey. However, the radical change that has occurred in my life is quite literally unbelievable. 9 months ago, today is actually my 9-month sober date. So 9 months ago, if you would have handed me the script to my life for the coming 9 months, I would not have believed it. I would not have believed it because of the unbelievable pain and suffering that I have been through in these 9 months, but I also would not have believed it because of my attitude and outlook on life after going through those periods of suffering and those trials. I feel more blessed today after having lost more than I ever could have imagined losing in these last 9 months than I ever have in my life. So the things that stand out to me in this reading as it pertains to my story is, first to start, just a single word: painstaking. What I have learned is recovery has to be your first priority. It has to be number one. We did an exercise in rehab where they asked you to write out your top 5 values. So, people are writing out my family, my faith, my health, on and on, my job, my career. And the counselor would go around the room and ask each individual to prioritize it. Basically, they said, gun to your head, I have to take one away. Which one are you handing over? And slowly people whittled down to what is their top value, their top priority. And then the counselor went on to say, for those of you who did not put your recovery as the top priority, you need to be prepared to lose everything that you ranked above your recovery. And I pushed back on this. I didn't really buy into it. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, how could I possibly put my recovery in front of my wife, in front of my family, like in front of being a good husband and father in that regard? But as I've continued down my recovery journey, I have truly realized how imperative it is as an addict to put your recovery first. And us addicts have a special advantage and a special power in this sense, and that is that every single one of us is selfish. Part of being an addict is your unbelievable selfish behavior that really drives like the core of your addiction. And so the way I've thought about it is like, instead of that selfishness driving you towards these behaviors and thought patterns that lead you to going to your substance of choice, in my case, alcohol, why not pivot it and point it to something that is good and that keeps you on your path of recovery? So to play out what that looks like in my life, for me to honestly say that I prioritize my recovery above everything else, that means that I attend my AA meetings just because that has really resonated with me. It's not for everyone, but it's really resonated with me. And so that looks like me going to AA twice a week, Tuesday and Thursday mornings. And on the odd week where we just have something as a family where it's like I have to be the one to drop my son off at daycare and it's got to be early because of work commitments, I don't just haphazardly go, I'm going to skip that meeting, no big deal. My wife and I are extremely deliberate about talking through any trade-offs of me not attending to my path back on recovery. So in the instance of having to skip a meeting, it's a discussion with her that, I can't go Tuesday morning because I have to drop our son off at daycare, but I can hit a meeting Monday night, or I can call my sponsor. I can talk with him, or just, Tuesday of this week, that second meeting is just not going to work. But we're very deliberate about any changes to my routine as it pertains to my recovery journey. So again, from my perspective, I've seen a lot of people relapse after being in rehab with 60 plus people. And one common theme, it's not the only common theme, but one common theme is that those that relapse do not put their recovery first and foremost above everything else. It sounds super brutal, but I value me staying on my journey and my path of recovery over attending to my wife, over attending to my child. Because when I'm on the road of recovery and when I stay on that path, I am 1,000 times more there and a better husband for my wife. I'm 1,000 times better as a father to my son. I can give and serve others way better, orders of magnitude better than I ever could if I fell off of the path of recovery and found myself in that addictive cycle again and going to alcohol. So for me, I've become really comfortable with it, but recovery comes first. No questions about it. The next part of this reading, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. Again, everything that has transpired for me over the last months just blow me away. We'll get more into the details of my story and the suffering that I have endured during these first 9 months in recovery, but it amazes me that I have been capable and able to be so strong and not fall back to alcohol, and quite honestly not even feel a little bit of a tug from that old vice that I used to have. Some of the other like short-term to medium-term gains that you get when you enter onto a path of recovery that like might seem unimportant, but like these are really big wins. I just listed a few out here. The color and life like return, and the sparkle returns to your eyes. I know when someone is going through a rough time now in the addict community because I can see it first and foremost in their eyes. And I saw it in my eyes. There was a sunkenness. There was like a voidness of joy and of life. And it really took like a week, but after that week, like I started looking in the mirror and I started seeing light again. And that just gave me momentum and brought me joy to see. Along with the eye thing, like your skin clears up and heals up. Like I had issues with a bunch of like, I don't even know, it was like gross that would occur when I went on a drinking binge. Like my skin would just get really dirty and really gross, and it's like I'm in my mid-30s and I'm dealing with freaking zits. It just didn't seem right. And ever since, entering into recovery, it's like your skin and just kind of like your overall self-care too takes a massive step forward. All of us who are addicts know that there are days where you don't eat properly. You don't shower, you don't clean yourself, you don't take care of yourself. And all of these things, as you start getting into your routine and entering into recovery, these are just like the short-term wins that you shouldn't let just go by without recognizing like how big of a deal that is. Because in our addictive cycles, in my like binges with alcoholism, like I would totally stop taking care of myself. I would also say like your appetite and eating normalizes, with a caveat. If you're an alcoholic, especially, like your sugar cravings early on are going to be pretty massive. Like your body is searching for that hit of what you used to give it. And honestly, like who cares? Give into the sugar cravings. It's early, and guess what? If you're giving into the sugar cravings and not giving in to the alcohol, you're not drunk. You're sober at the end of 24 hours. And that's really what's most important. On the sugar note, like I still to this day can crush a pint of ice cream in one sitting, like no questions. And again, like I don't beat myself up for it. At the end of the day, at the end of those 24 hours, I'm sober. Longer term, some of the big benefits that I've noticed and I've noticed within the community is your baseline mood improves when you're addicted to substances, especially alcohol, and especially in my case, kind of like the baseline of where your mood sits gets progressively lower and lower and lower and lower. And so even when I was sober, I would, in my cycles, I would spend anywhere from 5 to 21 days sober before going on another bender or binge. And even during those periods of sobriety, I couldn't see light in the day. I had a really hard time finding joy, and I just hit these, or not even hit. I lived in this space of depression and anxiety. Over time, and medication can play a big part in it. I have been on a pretty low dose antidepressant since leaving rehab, but I can feel that my baseline is steadily climbing, and I just kind of average throughout the day a much different outlook and a much different sense of peace and joy in my day. Another longer term benefit that you will start realizing is you can form healthy habits. This is the funny thing about rehab. Rehab doesn't solve anything for the addict. Rehab, it's 28 days long generally on the short end. And for those of you who are not aware, it takes 3 weeks to form a habit. So rehab is literally just your 3-week habit forming process plus a buffer week to hopefully really get it nailed. The place where people screw up with rehab is they step out the doors and they think that things are solved, and they don't realize that they are entering a new environment, and they almost need to they do need to reset the clock on basically forming new habits. So when I left rehab, I told myself I have to be extremely deliberate in what I am doing, how I am structuring my day, how I'm structuring my mornings, my afternoons, my evenings, because I am reframing and reconnecting for creating these new habits and these new mindsets. So these healthy habits are imperative for starting down and then staying on the road to recovery. A place where I struggled in the past with my alcoholism was I would have these habits or routines during my periods of sobriety, but then something would get a little off kilter. Like I would sleep in one morning. Like I wanted to get up at 5:30 and really get after things, and maybe I slept past my alarm, and at 6:15 by the time I woke up, I would literally say out loud to myself, "Fuck you, Kyle." That is how I started my day. And guess what? More often than not, I would wind up starting a bender that day. So the difference between having routines and habits then and having routines and habits now is I'm much more forgiving with myself when, maybe I need to sleep in some. And what I tell myself is, hey, my body's signaling it needs rest. That's okay. The other thing, kind of going along with your eating normalized, your weight can be managed. You can either put on weight that you need to put on, and I've seen many addicts who come in after a hard bender or something and need to put on weight, or you can take it off. It goes both ways certainly, but that ties back to a lot of the healthy habits that you're able to start to form, and then. One of the most amazing things for me is my symptoms of depression and anxiety completely went away, like 100%. Like I said, I used to spend all my time living in this state, this depressed state of mood where literally the sun would never shine. And then I had crippling anxiety, so bad at one point. My job is, to be honest with you, to be on phone calls a lot of times and represent a team that I work with. And so that often would require me to speak in front of, 60 plus to 150 people. I would get so nervous. Again, even when I was sober, I would be so nervous for talking to anyone outside of something that was super scripted that I would visibly shake and audibly you could hear my voice tremoring. I had a coworker once tell me after I gave a little spiel, he goes, "Kyle, you okay? It just sounds like you were running up a flight of steps." And it's that's how bad my performance anxiety had become because my nerves were fried. I had no ability to handle any stressors that came my way. And it manifested in like this pathetic delivery of like language and like literally I couldn't talk. And it's just a miracle to me that has all but disappeared. Like I still get nervous. I get nervous before I hit record on this, but I have methods and ways of just kind of dealing with it now. And as I sit here talking to you 20 minutes in, like I'm not nervous. I'm not shaking. So that itself has been an absolute miracle. And then other physical ailments begin to heal. I've seen people with speech impediments, stammers, tremors that start going away. I personally dealt with significant tremors. I would have really bad tremors when I was detoxing, but then those like smaller tremors would stick around during my periods of sobriety, and that has completely gone away, which is wonderful. It made me feel so old. I was in my mid-30s, but I was dealing with tremors. And then finally, and this is possibly the most important and honestly one of the hardest aspects about being on the journey of recovery, but your relationships start mending and start healing. Relationships get lost through this journey, and there is a bit of acceptance that relationships are two-way streets, and if one of those parties does not want it to work, you kind of have to let it go and walk away from it. But genuinely speaking, every single one of my relationships in life, I've been blessed, have stuck around. And that doesn't mean they're in an optimal place right now and that there's not work yet to do. I have a ton of work yet to do. But there's potential for all of them to mend and for all of them to get more genuine. That was like the biggest section. The next section I wanted to highlight was this, quote, "Feelings of uselessness and self-pity will disappear." I always had an excuse and I always had a sob story for why things were not well in my life and why I was permitted to drink. Work sucked. My personal financial situation sucked. This person said something mean to me. That person looked at me funny. I can't do X. I wish I could do Y. Just all of these stupid excuses that would come in. And it was funny because I would fix or figure out one of those situations and my drinking would still be around. And I would still have problems with addiction to alcohol. The funny thing about this one, this self-pity, is as soon as I started just worrying about myself and working on fixing myself, all of the sob stories and all of the excuses disappeared. Now when a difficult situation presents itself, I'm looking more at, first, I'm asking myself, can I do anything to control this and to change it? And if I can't, I just work on accepting it. And if I can, I'm building out a list of potential solutions for that problem in a realm that I can actually control. The next section, quote, "Our whole attitude and outlook on life will change." So I kind of hit on this one in that previous section, but there's a really good example in my story that occurred during my time in rehab. And that was the first time my wife came and visited me. It was my 7th day in, and we hadn't seen each other since I got dropped off that previous Monday. And I was showing my wife around. It's not a huge place. But I go, "Hey, you want to see the gym?" And I made a point that I was working out every single day I was in rehab. She's like, "Yeah, sure, I'll see the gym." And I walk her to this gym, and I open the door, and her reaction was, "Whoa, this is tiny." And I, without missing a beat, go, "Yeah, at least it's something." And I didn't think twice about that comment. My wife later came back and told me that was probably the moment when she realized things were different for me, because the old me would have seen that gym and gone, screw it. This is a BS gym. They should have more equipment. I should be able to do more things. And instead, I started looking at like this space and going, all right, what can I do in here? And for those of you who like many of us, make constant excuses about working out and stuff like that, just know that like if you really think about it, you can do a lot with a small amount of space. And so that just like change in outlook and attitude for me was such a big step. And I'll be honest, there is something that you can do stemming from this that I think was one of the key exercises that I started doing on the start of my path down recovery, and that is to practice gratitude. And I know some of you might be throwing up at the sounds of that, but what I specifically mean is at the end of every single day, just find one tiny aspect of life that you feel like you can say you are grateful to have witnessed, to have seen, to have done. And that's all. And this small gratitude practice, I personally liked writing it down. Your list is going to start to grow beyond one, and you're going to start to look at your life for areas of gratitude. As an alcoholic, at the very least, I can say at the end of the day, I didn't take a drink today. And I can be grateful for that on the worst day of my life. The next section, quote, we will intuitively know how to handle situations that used to baffle us. Again, this ties back to problems I had where it's like, gosh, like we're in such a tough financial situation and we can't get out of it. And, problems at work always arise. When I was drinking, again, even during stints of sobriety, I would literally not sleep at night over a whole weekend, and I would ruin the waking hours of a weekend thinking about one meeting that I had coming up on Monday that I was nervous about or worried about. And it destroyed family time together. It destroyed my mental health. And now the biggest problem could come across my desk at work in my personal life. And again, I know how to handle it because the first thing I do is ask myself, can I control anything about this situation? If I can't, I have to work at accepting it. If I can start listing out potential solutions. And then finally, quote, we are suddenly realizing that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. This is going to be kind of a lead-in to the next episode. I'm going to dive into my story and how this really became clear and became the case for me. I had what is commonly referred to as a God shot, which is just essentially like a bolt of lightning moment where everything came together for me. And although it didn't make sense and I didn't control it, it made sense. Really what I've learned, and I heard this from an old timer, he's got over 41 years of recovery, of time in recovery. The way that he phrased it and kind of what I'm circling around here, we can view our alcoholism and addiction as such. It's a gift from God to prepare us for the true challenges and the real suffering that life will present to us. And all of this, the handling and the carrying of that burden and suffering is part of each and every one of our purpose and plan and time here on this earth. So I know that this is often difficult to hear in the potential frame of mind that this podcast may find you at, but I wanted to offer it up early because I wanted you to have a vision for what could be. I think setting yourself up with a good vision of health, a good vision of clear mind, a good vision of self-love, a good vision of interest and love in other people is key to starting you down your path of recovery. And with that, I'm just going to read the promises one last time and then close out. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. So that's all I've got. Thank you. I love you, and you're worth it. Take care.